In this video, you and I get to take a look at the profiling capabilities and why we'd want to do it in an ICE environment. Let's begin. I'd like to share with you one of the administrator's favorite nightmares. It's when their boss walks in and says, "How many Windows 7 computers do we have running on our network right now?" Because, says the boss, there's a brand new vulnerability that affects Windows 7 and it's huge, and we need to document exactly which Windows 7 computers we have. And stuff like that happens all the time. For example, Shell Shock came out not too long ago. And as it turns out, there are hundreds of thousands of systems that are vulnerable due to what was discovered with Shell Shock, and those have to be updated and patched. So in ICE, one of the features that we have is a profiler service, and it asks the question, not who are you? We're going to do that with authentication, but regarding the system that's connecting to the network, what are you? Are you Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8? Are you Macintosh? Are you an iOS device like an iPhone or an iPad? Are you an Android device? There's two primary reasons that you and I would want to do profiling services with ICE on our network. Number one, it would be handy to have a nice, accurate picture of exactly what is connecting to our networks. And then secondly, we may want to base our authorization profiles based on those identities. So as devices connect to the network, we could go ahead and create buckets. And these buckets would be identity groups. As devices connect to our network, if we automatically profile those devices and are pretty sure of what those devices are, we could use the identity group information as part of our authorization policy. So if we wanted to make sure, for example, that any Apple iOS device, like an iPad, was to get only limited access to the network, we could categorize it, then go ahead and use this authorization policy with limited access. Or vice versa. Maybe you want to give iOS devices all kinds of access. It can be used in the same way. By profiling devices, which can associate a device with an identity group, and have that identity group used as part of our authorization policy. On my network access device, the switch, I've got some basic radius commands already in place. If we take a look at those with a show, run, pipe, please include the word radius or anything that starts with NUGG. That'll show us our entire radius configuration, including my password of nugget exclamation mark 23. And these are our standard network access device commands that we would use on a switch to interact with the ICE server who's driving the policy. Now, regarding profiling, without even turning on additional features, we already know about some of our devices that are connected to the network. For example, in the ICE console, if we go to Administration, and from the Administration dropdown, if we go under Identity Management and Identities and select Identities, here we have a user Bob that we created. If we take a look at Endpoints, there is a Windows 7 workstation. Now, this MAC address we might have added manually for the benefit of something such as MAC authentication bypass. However, the details regarding that endpoint were discovered dynamically. For example, if we select this Windows 7 workstation to look at the details, here it shows us that it's been automatically classified and put into an identity group called Workstation. And a big reason for that, it matched a policy called Windows 7 Workstation. And how certain is ICE that it's a Windows 7 workstation? The higher the certainty factor is, the more reliable the information is. It's also telling us, based on the MAC address, the first 6 characters of the MAC address, that this is a Dell computer, because the first 6 characters of the MAC address are in a range that's been assigned to Dell. And one of the cool things about profiling is that we're going to use many different factors to help narrow down and isolate what a device is. Now, by default, the ICE server is not doing as much as it could to profile and correctly identify hosts. If you and I want to tell the ICE server, hey, let's get busy, let's do some serious profiling to identify these devices, to do that, we would go under Administration, and under System, we would select Deployment. And we have a single server named ICE that we're dealing with. We'll click on ICE. And currently it's a standalone ICE server. If we want to make it a primary server, we can do that by clicking the Make Primary button. Scroll down, click on Save. And this is now a primary server. And right here on the general settings, you can see that the profiling service is enabled. If we take a look at profiling configuration, by clicking that tab, you'll notice that none of these are selected. So these are all options that we have in implementing additional information gathering for the profiling service that's part of ICE. So I thought to myself, what a great place to talk about the various methods we could use to increase the accuracy of profiling inside of an ICE environment by looking at this profiling configuration page. If we want to enable NetFlow, we can have our routers collecting NetFlow information and feeding it over to our ICE server. And that way, ICE can identify the open ports that devices are connecting to and from, and that can add additional information regarding profiling a specific device with what services and ports it's using. If we want to analyze DHCP traffic, and it states here it's looking for traffic that's being sent from the IP helper function. And the reason that can be helpful in profiling a device is that not every device uses the same DHCP options. A DHCP span is if we're doing spanning of all the DHCP traffic over to the ICE server. So it doesn't need to listen in on a specific port because it's all being sent into the ICE server. So if we had multiple interfaces on our ICE server, maybe we dedicate one of those to receiving all of that span information, which is being mirrored by the switch. If we're using the HTTP probe, that's going to capture and look at the user agent field information sent by a web browser on that host to a server. And that information is slightly different based on the operating systems involved. And again, that's one additional data point that might help clarify a certain version of an operating system compared to another, which results in better profiling capability on the ICE server. If we select Radius, the ICE server is going to start analyzing in more detail the information that's coming from the NAD, the network access device. For example, the MAC address to IP address binding regarding a client who's coming in on a port, as well as Cisco's CDP or link level discovery protocol, which can provide additional information regarding the device that's connected to that switch port. Nmap is a lot of fun. It's really aggressive. It uses a lot of CPU, but it's pretty effective. For example, if we wanted to scan the entire subnet of 192.168.1.0/24, we can simply go ahead and click on Run Scan, and it says, hey, this might be a pretty lengthy procedure. Are you sure? We'll say yes. And it is currently running that Nmap scan. So it's identifying all the hosts that are responding on that subnet. Nmap is also doing a set of scans for certain ports for each of the IP addresses in that subnet, trying to identify who's responding, and from that response information, what type of operating system is sitting behind that IP address. It says right here that we can click to see the latest scan results, and that's going to take us over to administration and identities and endpoints, and we'll look at that together in just a moment to see any endpoints that it discovered. Another option is DNS. If we enable that, it can go ahead and try to find out the fully qualified domain name behind an IP address for a host. We have the option for an SNMP query. So if, for example, we have a read-only query on most of our devices in our enterprise, which, by the way, would be a huge security risk, but if we did, ICE could use that as an additional data point to collect information to identify and profile what type of operating system is hiding or sitting behind an IP address. And there's also an option for an SNMP trap. So now that we've taken a look at these probes, I'm going to go ahead and click on Reset because I don't want to save any of those right now. But we did run that scan. And so if we go over to Administration and under Identity Management, go to Identities. And now if we go down to Endpoints, we've got this Windows 7 workstation, and we also discovered an HP device that has this current MAC address and this current IP address. And that was from our Nmap scan that we just did. So if we're saying, I wonder what that device is, we could go ahead and click on it. Based on results, Nmap used SNMP to query that device, because that's the only tool that we ran was Nmap. I didn't enable anything else. Here's that MAC address. It matched a policy called HP device in the ICE server. There's the actual model number. It is a P1102W printer. And the OUI, the first 6 characters of that MAC address, point to HP because they have that first 6 characters associated with Hewlett Packard. Now, in our profile settings, if we had said to go ahead and use SNMP, we would want to make sure we have the correct SNMP configuration set up. So under Administration and under Network Resources, if we go to our network access devices, so currently it's showing we have a switch as our only network access device that's currently configured. If we go to the details for that switch and we scroll to the bottom of the details, we could go ahead and enable and set up the SNMP settings right here. Now, beyond just working with the switch for SNMP, if we're going to be doing direct SNMP queries to devices that connect to the network, we would also need to specify then what the key or community string we're going to use to pull those devices on the network. For example, a printer or a workstation that's running an SNMP agent. And to set that up, we'd go to Administration, and under System, we'd go to Settings. We could also, because we're right here under Administration already, we could just click on System and Settings, and any way you want to navigate to that is perfectly fine. And if we click on the link for profiling in the settings section, here's where we could define the SNMP strings we're going to use for the queries to the nodes that are connecting to our network. So this password, the default password for SNMP, if we click on show, is currently set as public. Hopefully in our production networks, we're not using the default community string of public. We've changed it to something else. And we'd also want to make sure that the ICE knows what that new password is, that new community string, so it can query our SNMP devices on our network. The other thing here in the profiler configuration as well is we could change this to a port bounce whenever it's doing profiling against a device. And the reason it's not on by default is that oftentimes a computer that's connected and working on the network does not want to be interrupted with a bounced port every time ICE wants to do profiling against that device. But the option exists, and it's right here where we would set it if you want that behavior. If we want to look at or modify the profile policies, we'd go to Policy, and then from the drop-down, select Profiling. And in this version of ICE, there's close to 300 profile policies to choose from. If we want to sort through and say, you know what, I just want to see the ones that are Microsoft related, in the show window, we could use the drop down, select quick filter, and then simply type in Microsoft. It is not case sensitive, and that will show us any of the profiling policies that have the word Microsoft in them. If we wanted to see the details for that, we can simply click on Microsoft Workstation, and that will open up the details for that profiling policy. And here it's stating that if these predefined conditions, when checked against that machine, it's going to increase the certainty factor by 10 for each of those checks. What we could also do in this profiler policy, we could also specify that we want to do a common port and operating system scan. We could also click this radio button and say, you know what, I want to create a brand new matching identity group based on matching Microsoft workstations. And then if we wanted to, we could take devices that fell into that Microsoft Workstation identity group and use that as part of our authorization policy. So I am not going to save those changes, but I did want to show you a couple other things. If we click on Home, here on the home page, it can show us the exact number of current profiled endpoints. And since we have this great information, another way of getting at that information is to go to Operations and under Reports. Here we can expand the endpoint and users reports, and we'll scroll down, and there's the profiled endpoint summary. Now we have not yet run this report, so over here is simply a sample report that's showing us the endpoints as well as which policy they mapped under. So in our case, I'm going to go and use the drop down, and I'm going to say the last 7 days and run. And I've got two devices. We've got our HP device that we learned fairly recently, thanks to Nmap, and we've got our Windows 7 workstation. And by clicking on the details, we can get more information regarding those endpoints. And if we go back to administration and go to licensing, I'm currently using the evaluation. I've got 54 days left. And right here is showing us the quantity of use and remaining regarding our current license on this ICE server. In this video, we've taken a look at the benefits of profiling, as well as how we can turn on additional features, additional probes, to get more accurate information for the profiling process. I have had a great time in this video, and I'm so glad you joined me for it. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.